Introduction. The lamp we forgot to light. There is a strange loneliness that follows modern human beings. You can find it in crowded airports, in expensive homes, in successful careers, in glowing phone screens at 2 o'clock in the morning, in conversations that never reach the heart, in victories that somehow feel incomplete. And perhaps, if you are honest, you have felt it too. Not always, not constantly, but enough to recognize it. A quiet sense that something important is missing. A feeling that despite all our progress, despite all our information, despite all our achievements, something fundamental remains unresolved. We have built cities that touch the clouds. We carry more knowledge in our pockets than entire civilizations once possessed. We can communicate across continents in seconds. We can travel faster, work faster, learn faster, and consume more information in a single day than our ancestors encountered in months. Yet anxiety grows, restlessness grows, loneliness grows, conflict grows, and beneath the surface, millions of people carry the same unspoken question. Why, after everything we have gained, do we still struggle so deeply with ourselves? This book begins with that question. But before we can answer it, we must confront an even more unsettling mystery. What if we have been searching in the wrong direction? For thousands of years, humanity has attempted to improve itself. We created philosophies, laws, moral systems, codes of conduct, educational institutions, movements, ideologies, spiritual traditions. Entire civilizations have devoted themselves to the project of making human beings better. And yet, generation after generation, the same fears reappear, the same greed, the same anger, the same insecurity, the same violence, the same confusion. The costumes change, the technology changes, the language changes, but the inner struggle remains astonishingly familiar. Why? Why do old problems keep returning in new forms? Why does humanity seem trapped in repeating the same emotional patterns across centuries? Why do intelligent people repeatedly sabotage their own happiness? Why do successful people often remain deeply dissatisfied? Why do we continue fighting darkness while somehow producing more of it? The answer is hidden beneath almost everything we have ever been taught about personal transformation, and most people never discover it. There is an old mistake that appears so reasonable we rarely question it. When we see anger, we try to eliminate anger. When we see fear, we try to eliminate fear. When we see dishonesty, we try to eliminate dishonesty. When we see suffering, we try to eliminate suffering. We attack symptoms. We organize our lives around fighting consequences. We spend years trying to manage what is visible. Meanwhile, something invisible continues generating the very conditions we are struggling against. It is like standing in a garden where every flower is dying and deciding to polish the petals. The effort is sincere. The intention is noble. The result changes nothing. Because the problem was never in the flower. The problem was always hidden underground. And that realization changes the entire story. What if anger is not the disease? What if fear is not the disease? What if greed is not the disease? What if anxiety is not the disease? What if the things we spend our lives fighting are merely messages, signals, warnings, symptoms pointing toward something deeper, something almost nobody notices, something that exists beneath every human conflict, beneath every personal struggle, beneath every disappointment, beneath every emotional wound? The discovery of that hidden source is the beginning of freedom. But before we reach it, we must first dismantle one of the most comforting illusions humanity has ever created. The illusion that the problem belongs to our time. Because it doesn't. The problem is older than nations, older than religions, older than philosophies, older than recorded history. It has traveled with humanity from the beginning. And until we understand it, we will continue repeating the same cycles while believing we are making progress. This book is not about becoming a better person, at least not in the way most people imagine. It is not about adding another layer of self-improvement, another system of discipline, another collection of rules, another list of behaviors to imitate. The world already contains enough rules, enough advice, enough instructions, enough voices telling you what you should become. This book is about something far more fundamental. It is about discovering why transformation so often fails, why suppression creates conflict, why morality without awareness creates hypocrisy, why self-condemnation weakens the human spirit, why fighting darkness strengthens it, and why the answer has been hiding in plain sight all along. Imagine entering a room that has remained locked for decades. The room is completely dark. You could spend years trying to push the darkness out. You could attack it, argue with it, fear it, condemn it, fight it. Nothing would change. Then one day, someone lights a lamp, and instantly the struggle becomes unnecessary. Not because the darkness was defeated, but because it was never the real problem. The absence of light was. This book is about that lamp. The forgotten lamp. The neglected lamp. The lamp hidden beneath beliefs, identities, fears, ambitions, and conditioning. The lamp of awareness. The lamp of consciousness. The lamp that countless people spend their entire lives searching for outside themselves. As we move forward together, you may encounter ideas that challenge assumptions you have carried for years. Some chapters may feel uncomfortable. Some questions may disturb familiar conclusions. Some insights may shake foundations you never expected to question. Good. That discomfort is not an obstacle. It is a doorway. Every genuine awakening begins with the collapse of something false. Every breakthrough begins with a disruption. Every transformation begins when old certainties become impossible to maintain. If at times this book unsettles you, stay with it. The most important discoveries rarely arrive wrapped in comfort. They arrive as invitations. Invitations to see differently, to think differently, to observe differently, to live differently. There is a reason you are here. Perhaps you are searching for peace, perhaps clarity, perhaps freedom, perhaps success that does not leave you empty, perhaps understanding, perhaps something you cannot yet name. Whatever brought you here, one thing is certain. The journey ahead is not about acquiring something new. It is about uncovering something that has always been present, something hidden beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the endless struggle, something quietly waiting to be remembered. And if you follow this path carefully, patiently, and honestly, you may discover what generations of seekers, philosophers, teachers, and explorers have attempted to point toward. Not a new belief, not a new ideology, not a new system, but a new way of seeing. And once that seeing awakens, everything changes. The question is not whether the light exists. The question is whether we are finally ready to turn toward it. Because the story you are about to enter is not ultimately about morality, or success, or failure, or history, or society. It is about the greatest mystery any human being can encounter, the mystery of consciousness itself. And that is where our journey begins. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Lost Golden Age. Imagine standing in a vast city after sunset. Thousands of lights shine from apartment windows. Cars move through the streets. People hurry home. Some are laughing. Some are worried. Some are falling in love. Some are preparing for battles nobody else can see. Now imagine someone standing beside you and saying, "The world has never been this lost." At first, the statement sounds convincing. The news seems to support it. Social media seems to support it. Economic uncertainty seems to support it. The stress of modern life certainly seems to support it. But then another question appears. A very uncomfortable question. Compared to when? The answer most people unconsciously give is, compared to the past, compared to the good old days, compared to the age when people supposedly lived with greater wisdom, compared to a time when human beings were more honorable, more peaceful, and more awake. Yet this is where the story becomes truly interesting. Because history leaves behind a peculiar optical illusion. An illusion so powerful that entire civilizations mistake it for truth. Imagine visiting an ancient harbor. Hundreds of ships once departed from that shoreline. Thousands of sailors lived and worked there. Most were ordinary people. They worried about survival. They made mistakes. They argued. They lied. They loved. They feared. They struggled. Then centuries passed. The harbor disappeared. The sailors were forgotten. Only a few legendary captains remained in memory. Generations later, people study those captains and conclude, what an extraordinary age that must have been. But they are seeing only the stars. They are not seeing the night sky that surrounded them. This is how memory deceives us. History does not preserve the average person. History preserves the exceptions, the rare, the extraordinary, the luminous. 1,000 years from now, most of us will disappear from collective memory. Our routines, our arguments, our successes, our failures, gone. Yet a handful of remarkable individuals may remain. Future generations will study them and imagine that everyone living beside them shared their greatness. But reality rarely works that way, and that single realization changes everything. Think about it. Whenever an extraordinary teacher appears, what does that imply? Why would humanity need wisdom if wisdom already dominated society? Why would anyone teach compassion to people who are already compassionate? Why would anyone speak about truth if everyone is already truthful? Why would anyone encourage peace if conflict no longer existed? The appearance of great teachers reveals something hidden. Lighthouses are built where ships get lost. Maps are created where travelers become confused. Guides appear where people repeatedly wander off course. The existence of great wisdom is not proof that society was enlightened. Often, it is evidence that society desperately needed enlightenment. Few people realize what this truly means. The very figures we celebrate as symbols of humanity's greatness may also be reminders of humanity's confusion, not because they failed, but because they emerged in response to a problem. A lighthouse is beautiful, but its beauty quietly reveals the existence of dangerous waters. And throughout history, humanity has built many lighthouses, far more than most people notice. The deeper you investigate the past, the more another pattern emerges. Conflict was everywhere. Competition was everywhere. Fear was everywhere. Power struggles were everywhere. The clothing changed. The language changed. The tools changed. But the human mind remained astonishingly familiar. People still feared losing status. People still worried about security. People still desired more than they possessed. People still compared themselves to others. People still sought control over uncertain futures. The stage changed. The actors did not. This realization may feel disappointing at first. After all, many people secretly hope there was once a perfect age, an era they could admire, a civilization that finally got everything right. But perhaps the truth is far more liberating. Because if no generation solved the human problem completely, then our struggles are not evidence that we are uniquely broken. They are evidence that we are human. And suddenly the burden becomes lighter. You are not failing because you live in a difficult century. You are facing the same inner challenges human beings have faced for thousands of years. Different scenery, same weather. Different technology, same storms. Different century, same mind. Yet there remains one mystery we have not solved. If darkness has followed humanity across every age, where does it actually come from? Most people point toward society. Others point toward governments. Others blame culture. Others blame wealth. Others blame poverty. Others blame the speed of modern life. And all of them may be seeing fragments of the picture. But fragments are not the whole. Something deeper continues operating beneath the surface. Something that survives every generation. Something older than nations. Older than traditions. Older than institutions. A hidden mechanism inside human consciousness itself. Until we understand that mechanism, history simply repeats its costumes. The characters change. The scenery changes. The language changes. But the same drama unfolds again and again. The real question, then, is not why one era falls into darkness. The real question is why the human mind keeps creating it. And that question opens the doorway to the next stage of our journey. Because what we discover next will challenge one of the most deeply accepted assumptions about human nature itself. The puzzle has only begun to reveal its shape, and the next piece changes everything. Chapter 2. The Fragrance and the Mask. There is a strange pattern that has followed humanity across centuries. It appears in schools, in families, in governments, in spiritual traditions, and even in the private conversations people have with themselves. The pattern sounds reasonable. In fact, it sounds so reasonable that almost nobody questions it. It says, become better, control yourself, be more moral, be more disciplined, be what you are not. At first glance, this advice appears noble, perhaps even necessary. Yet there is a hidden reason why so many people spend their entire lives trying to become better and still remain trapped in the same fears, desires, anxieties, and inner conflicts. The explanation is far different than it appears, and until we understand it, humanity will continue walking in circles while believing it is moving forward. Like a traveler who mistakes motion for progress. Like a ship that sails day and night, only to discover it never left the harbor. The mistake that repeats across generations. Imagine a gardener standing before a tree whose leaves have begun to turn brown. The branches look unhealthy. The fruit is shrinking. The tree is clearly suffering. Most people immediately focus on the leaves. They polish them, paint them, trim them, decorate them. They become experts in managing appearances. But few ask the obvious question. What is happening beneath the ground? What is happening in the roots? This is where humanity has often misunderstood itself. For thousands of years, people have focused almost entirely on behavior. Fix the action, control the impulse, force the habit, suppress the temptation, correct the appearance. But behavior is only the leaf. Something deeper feeds it, something hidden beneath awareness. Something that lives in the roots of consciousness. And this is where a profound misunderstanding began. Most people have been taught that goodness creates inner transformation, but the reality may be the reverse. Inner transformation creates goodness. One is manufactured, the other is natural. One is a performance, the other is a fragrance. And that distinction changes everything, because fragrance cannot be painted onto a flower. It emerges from the flower's nature. No rose struggles to smell beautiful. No forest practices authenticity. No sunrise rehearses its radiance. Their expression is simply the consequence of what they are. Human beings, however, have spent centuries trying to create the fragrance without transforming the source. Trying to manufacture peace while remaining internally divided. Trying to display kindness while carrying resentment. Trying to appear pure while remaining afraid of their own desires. And the result has been predictable. Masks. Beautiful masks. Respectable masks. Socially acceptable masks. But masks nonetheless. The war nobody sees. There is a conflict that takes place inside millions of people every day. A silent war. Invisible to the world. A war between what they feel and what they believe they should feel. Between what exists and what is permitted to exist. Between reality and ideal. Most people assume this war is a sign of growth. But what if it is actually the source of suffering? Consider a young professional in a busy American city. He works long hours. He wants success. He wants recognition. He wants financial security. Nothing unusual. Nothing shameful. Yet somewhere he has learned that ambition is selfish. So he begins fighting his ambition. Part of him wants to achieve. Part of him wants to suppress the desire. Now there are two minds living inside one person, and the conflict begins. Or imagine someone scrolling through social media late at night. Jealousy appears. Comparison appears. Loneliness appears. Instead of understanding these emotions, they immediately declare, I shouldn't feel this. And a second layer of suffering is born. The original emotion was manageable. The resistance becomes the prison. This mechanism operates everywhere. The mind creates a feeling, then creates a judge, then creates guilt, then creates fear, then creates suppression, then creates exhaustion, and finally wonders why peace never arrives. Yet this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because suppressed forces do not disappear. They simply change their address. What we bury never stays buried. Many people imagine the mind as a brightly lit room. In reality, it resembles a vast city at night. The illuminated streets represent awareness. But beneath them stretches an enormous underground network few people ever explore. Every rejected emotion enters that underground world. Every denied desire. Every hidden fear. every forbidden impulse, every unexpressed longing. Nothing disappears. It merely moves out of sight. This is one of the deepest truths about human psychology. The universe does not erase energy because we dislike it. The mind does not destroy desires because we condemn them. What is pushed down continues living. It waits. It watches. And eventually it returns through another door. Sometimes it returns as anxiety. Sometimes as obsession. Sometimes as anger. Sometimes as compulsive behavior. Sometimes as dreams. Sometimes as unexplained fear. The person believes they escaped the problem. The problem simply changed its costume. And that single realization explains countless human struggles. Many people spend years fighting shadows without realizing they themselves created the darkness. The Traveler and the River. There is an old story I once heard while crossing a mountain valley. Whether it happened exactly as told does not matter. Its truth lives somewhere deeper than facts. Two travelers were walking through rugged highland terrain. One was older, the other much younger. Both belonged to a community devoted to strict discipline and self-control. Late one evening, they arrived at a river swollen by recent rains. The water rushed violently between the rocks. Standing at the edge was a young woman. She needed to cross, but the current was too dangerous to attempt alone. The older traveler noticed her immediately, and in that moment something unexpected happened. A simple thought appeared. Perhaps I should help her cross. An ordinary thought. A compassionate thought. Yet it terrified him. For decades he had trained himself to avoid all contact. He had spent years convincing himself he had conquered every desire. Now a single moment exposed a hidden truth. The desire had never disappeared. It had merely gone underground. Suddenly his heart raced. His breathing changed. His mind filled with conflict. He looked away. He hurried toward the river. He repeated sacred words to himself. He tried to force the thought out. But something strange happened. The more he resisted the thought, the stronger it became. The woman seemed more beautiful each time he tried not to see her. His imagination painted details reality never contained. His struggle fed the very thing he wished to escape. Meanwhile, the younger traveler quietly approached. Without hesitation, he offered assistance. He helped the woman onto his shoulders, crossed the river, set her safely on the opposite bank, then continued walking. The incident lasted only minutes. The journey continued, but something important was happening beneath the surface. The older traveler remained trapped in the river long after leaving it. For hours his mind replayed the scene. Judgment appeared. Resentment appeared. Confusion appeared. Perhaps even envy appeared. By the time they reached their destination, he could no longer contain himself. He confronted the younger traveler. You violated everything we stand for. You carried her. You touched her. You broke the rules. The younger traveler listened quietly, then smiled, and replied with a sentence that transformed the entire situation. I left her beside the river. You are still carrying her. The hidden weight. Most people immediately recognize the wisdom of the story, yet few realize how deeply it applies to their own lives. Many are still carrying old failures, old heartbreaks, old embarrassments, old desires, old fears, old resentments, sometimes for decades. Not because these experiences remain alive, but because suppression keeps them alive. The mind continues gripping what it never truly understood. And this reveals a startling truth. Freedom is not created through repression. Freedom is created through understanding. What is understood relaxes. What is merely suppressed waits. This is why forced morality often fails. It attempts to control the branches while ignoring the roots. It manages appearances while neglecting consciousness. And whenever consciousness remains unchanged, the same patterns eventually return, perhaps in new forms, perhaps under new names. But they return, because the source remains untouched. Yet this discovery raises a much larger question. If suppression cannot transform human beings, what can? If fighting ourselves only strengthens the conflict, what is the alternative? If morality is merely the fragrance, then what is the flower? And what hidden transformation allows that fragrance to emerge naturally, without effort, without struggle, without masks? The answer waits deeper than behavior, deeper than discipline, deeper than belief. And once we uncover it, The entire architecture of interchange begins to look completely different. But that revelation belongs to the next stage of the journey. And that is where the real investigation begins. Chapter 3. The disease behind the symptoms. There is a mistake so ancient, so widespread, and so deeply embedded in human thinking that entire civilizations have built their lives upon it. Yet the moment it is seen clearly, something extraordinary begins to happen. The struggle changes. The battlefield changes. Even the meaning of personal transformation changes. Most people spend their lives fighting smoke. Very few search for the fire. And that is why the smoke keeps returning. The invisible split. Imagine a city divided by an unseen wall. On one side is the public city, the city everyone sees, the polished streets, the clean buildings, the carefully maintained appearance. On the other side lies the hidden city, the forgotten alleys, the underground tunnels, the secrets nobody discusses, the fears nobody admits, the desires nobody confesses, the wounds nobody understands. Most human beings live exactly this way, not as one person, but as two. One self is displayed. The other is concealed. One self smiles. The other suffers. One self follows rules. The other quietly rebels. One self speaks virtue. The other carries confusion. And the exhausting effort required to maintain this division slowly drains life itself. People call it stress. People call it anxiety. People call it burnout. But beneath all these names lives a deeper reality. The mind has become divided against itself. And whenever energy is spent maintaining an internal civil war, peace becomes impossible. Yet this is where the mystery deepens. Because once the mind becomes divided, only two paths seem available. Neither path leads where people hope. The first escape, the art of pretending. Some people discover a solution. At least it appears to be a solution. They learn to wear masks. Beautiful masks. Convincing masks. Socially admired masks. They continue presenting the image the world expects. Meanwhile, hidden corridors are created beneath the surface. Secret compromises. Private indulgences. Unspoken contradictions. Carefully protected double lives. The outer image remains untouched. The inner reality continues unchanged. This is the birth of hypocrisy. Not because people are inherently dishonest, but because they are trying to survive an impossible conflict. A person is told, never feel anger, yet anger appears. They are told, never desire, yet desire appears. They are told, never feel jealousy, yet jealousy appears. What happens next? The feeling cannot be removed, so it must be hidden. And every hidden thing demands another layer of concealment. Eventually, the individual becomes trapped inside a theater production they never intended to create. Performing for others. Performing for society. Performing even for themselves. And after enough years pass, something terrifying occurs. They no longer know which part is real. The mask has fused with the face. Yet there was one detail most people never noticed. Hypocrisy is not merely lying to others. Its deepest form is lying to oneself. And self-deception is one of the most dangerous prisons ever constructed, because the prisoner no longer realizes they are imprisoned. The second escape, collapse. Not everyone becomes a performer. Some refuse. Some continue fighting themselves directly. They wage war against every forbidden impulse, every unwanted thought, every uncomfortable feeling, every natural desire. They become their own prison guards. Day after day, year after year, decade after decade, and eventually the tension becomes unbearable. Imagine stretching a bridge cable tighter and tighter. At first it holds, then it strains, then it trembles, then it snaps. Human consciousness behaves similarly. A mind forced into endless conflict cannot remain balanced forever. Something breaks. Sometimes it breaks dramatically, sometimes quietly. Sometimes the person continues functioning while inwardly collapsing. Few people realize how much of modern suffering originates here. The constant pressure to become someone else. The relentless effort to suppress what already exists. The endless battle between reality and ideal. And this is why a startling paradox appears throughout modern society. As material comfort increases, inner distress often increases alongside it. As external systems become more sophisticated, internal confusion frequently grows. As knowledge expands, wisdom does not necessarily follow. Something important is happening beneath the surface, and most people spend years looking in the wrong direction. The civilization of exhaustion. Walk through any major city: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo. The names do not matter. The pattern remains remarkably similar. Millions of people moving quickly, constant stimulation, constant information, constant comparison, constant pressure. The world has never offered so many opportunities. Yet countless people feel more overwhelmed than ever. Why? The common explanation points toward technology, or economics, or social change. Those factors matter, but they are not the deepest cause. The deeper cause is internal fragmentation. A divided mind experiences every challenge with multiplied intensity. Even success becomes stressful. Even achievement becomes exhausting. Even rest becomes difficult, because the conflict never ends. The body sleeps. The struggle does not. The career advances. The struggle remains. Money grows. The struggle follows. Relationships change. The struggle adapts. The external world evolves. The internal war continues. And eventually, many people reach a frightening realization. They have spent their lives trying to fix symptoms while never understanding the disease. The hidden door. There is a story told among old storytellers. Whether it happened exactly this way is irrelevant. The truth it points toward is what matters. A respected religious leader desperately wanted to attend a performance that his own teachings publicly condemned. He was fascinated, curious, drawn toward it. Yet his reputation prevented him from entering openly. So he sent a discreet message to the theater manager. "Is there a hidden entrance through which I may enter unseen?" The manager replied kindly, "Certainly. There is a door through which people may enter without being seen by the crowd." Then he added, "But there is no door through which reality itself cannot see you." The message was simple. The hidden entrance solves a social problem. It does not solve an inner one. And that is the tragedy of hypocrisy. People become experts at hiding from one another, yet remain unable to hide from themselves. No secret passage exists inside consciousness. No disguise survives self-awareness. No performance fools reality. Eventually, every hidden contradiction asks to be seen. And what happens next changes the entire meaning of our journey. Because the problem is not the contradiction. The problem is our refusal to understand it. Smoke is not the fire. Now we arrive at one of the most important discoveries in this book. A discovery many people spend their entire lives missing. Anger is not the disease. Greed is not the disease. Dishonesty is not the disease. Jealousy is not the disease. Fear is not the disease. These are symptoms, messages, signals, indicators, nothing more. Imagine the warning light on a car dashboard suddenly illuminates. What would happen if you smash the light with a hammer? The warning disappears, but the mechanical problem remains. In fact, it may become even more dangerous because now the message can no longer be seen. This is exactly what happens when people fight symptoms. The symptom is silenced. The source survives, and the suffering continues. The answer lies somewhere unexpected. The very things we condemn may actually be trying to teach us something. They are messengers, not enemies. Signals, not causes. Clues, not conclusions. And that single realization changes everything. Because if symptoms are not the disease, then what is? What hidden force gives birth to all these expressions? What unseen root produces thousands of different forms of suffering? What remains undiscovered beneath anger, fear, dishonesty, insecurity, and conflict? The one disease. Strip away the symptoms. Remove the labels. Look beneath the surface. Go deeper. Then deeper still. Eventually, every path leads toward the same source. A fundamental disconnection from oneself. A forgetting. A blindness. A lack of direct awareness regarding who and what we truly are. Not ignorance of information. Not lack of education. Not absence of intelligence. Something much deeper. Self-ignorance. The failure to know one's own consciousness. The failure to understand the machinery of the mind. The failure to observe the forces operating within. This is the root. Everything else grows from it. A person who does not understand themselves becomes vulnerable to every impulse, every fear, every illusion, every unconscious pattern. Their life becomes reaction rather than awareness. And from that unconsciousness, all other symptoms emerge. Just as fever emerges when the body is struggling with illness. The fever is not the enemy. The fever is the message. Likewise, anger, greed, fear, dishonesty, and conflict are messages. They are revealing something hidden, something asking to be understood, something asking to be illuminated. And here we discover the difference between morality and awakening. Morality often tries to erase the symptom. Awareness seeks the source. Morality says, "Do not be angry." Awareness asks, "What creates anger?" Morality says, "Do not lie." Awareness asks, "What fear makes truth difficult?" Morality says, "Control yourself." Awareness asks, "Who is this self that requires control?" One approach fights the leaves. The other nourishes the roots. One creates struggle. The other creates understanding. And understanding possesses a power that force never will. The real journey is about to begin. Chapter 4. Stop fighting the darkness. There is a moment in every human life when a profound question appears. Why do some people seem untouched by insults, criticism, rejection, and hostility? Why do they move through storms without becoming storms themselves? Why does anger find fertile ground in one person and die quietly in another? Most people believe the answer lies in discipline, or willpower, or extraordinary self-control. But the truth is far more fascinating. And once you see it, an entirely new understanding of inner transformation begins to emerge. Because the strongest people are not those who have learned how to suppress their reactions. The strongest people are those in whom the reaction itself has dissolved. That difference changes everything. The gift that requires acceptance. Imagine someone standing at your front door carrying a package. They ring the bell. You open the door. They extend the package toward you. But you refuse to take it. What happens next? The package remains with the person who brought it. Simple, obvious, undeniable. Yet almost nobody realizes that emotions often operate according to the same principle. Insults are invitations. Offense is an offered package. Hatred is a delivery. Humiliation is a transaction waiting for participation. But every transaction requires two parties, the sender and the receiver. Without both, nothing is completed. This sounds simple. Yet hidden within this simplicity lies one of the greatest secrets of human freedom. Most suffering enters our lives only after we unconsciously accept it. And that is where today's chapter truly begins. The village that failed. Long ago, a traveler entered a village whose residents deeply disliked him. The reasons no longer matter. Human history has always contained people who resent what they do not understand. Sometimes they fear it. Sometimes they envy it. Sometimes they simply feel threatened by it. The traveler walked calmly through the village road. The villagers surrounded him. Their words became sharp. Their insults became cruel. They shouted accusations. Mockery filled the air. The crowd expected outrage. They expected defense. They expected anger. Instead, the traveler listened patiently. When they finally exhausted themselves, he smiled gently and said, "My friends, if you have finished, I should continue my journey. Another village awaits me." The crowd became confused. One man stepped forward. "Have you not heard what we said? We were insulting you. We were not having a conversation." The traveler nodded. "I heard every word." "Then why are you not angry?" Now the mystery deepened. Because what happened next revealed something most people spend their entire lives missing. The traveler replied, "A few hours ago, people from another village offered me baskets of fruit. I thanked them, but I was not hungry, so they took the fruit back." Then he paused and asked, "What do you think they did with it afterward?" Someone in the crowd answered, "They probably shared it with their families." The traveler smiled. "Exactly. Today you have brought me insults, but I am not accepting them. Now you must decide what to do with them yourselves." For a moment, silence fell over the road. not because the villagers had been defeated, but because something unexpected had happened. They had encountered a person who refused to participate in the transaction, and without participation, the entire mechanism collapsed. The difference between suppression and awakening. Many people misunderstand stories like this. They imagine the traveler was secretly angry but hiding it, secretly hurt but concealing it, secretly offended but controlling himself. That interpretation misses the point entirely. Suppression is not freedom. Suppression is imprisonment. Suppression means the anger remains. The fire continues burning. Only the smoke is hidden. Awakening is different. Awakening means the fuel itself is gone. There is nothing left to suppress, nothing left to resist, nothing left to conceal. This distinction is essential because countless people spend their lives trying to become calm, trying to become loving, trying to become patient, trying to become peaceful, yet effort alone rarely succeeds. Why? Because effort is usually directed at behavior, while the real issue exists deeper within consciousness. The traveler did not defeat anger. He outgrew the conditions that create anger, and that is a completely different phenomenon. The alchemy of energy. Most people see emotions as enemies. Fear must be destroyed. Desire must be destroyed. Anger must be destroyed. Passion must be destroyed. But what if this entire approach is mistaken? What if the very energies we fear contain hidden possibilities? Consider a river. The same water that floods a village can illuminate an entire city when directed through a power station. The water is not the problem. Direction is the issue. Transformation is the issue. Understanding is the issue. Human energy behaves similarly. Anger is energy. Desire is energy. Ambition is energy. Passion is energy. Intensity is energy. Life itself is energy. The question is never whether the energy exists. The question is what becomes of it. This is where humanity has spent centuries looking in the wrong direction. People try to destroy the energy. Rarely do they learn how to transform it. Yet this is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Because transformation does not require violence. It requires awareness. The garden and the compost. Imagine two neighbors. Both receive the same pile of compost. Dark, messy, unpleasant. One neighbor dumps it beside the house. The odor spreads everywhere. Windows remain closed. Visitors avoid the property. Life becomes uncomfortable. The other neighbor carries the compost into a garden. Weeks pass, then months. Flowers begin appearing. Colors emerge. Fragrance fills the air. People stop to admire the beauty. Now look closely. The fragrance came from the same material that once produced the odor. Nothing was destroyed. Everything was transformed. And that single realization contains an entire philosophy of human growth. Love is not the enemy of anger. Love may be anger transformed. Wisdom is not the enemy of desire. Wisdom may be desire transformed. Compassion is not the enemy of power. Compassion may be power transformed. The energies remain. Only their expression changes. Few people realize what this truly means. The very forces you condemn within yourself may contain the seeds of your greatest potential. The danger of self-condemnation. There is another trap waiting for anyone who begins the inner journey. Perhaps it is even more dangerous than anger itself. Self-hatred. The quiet belief that something is fundamentally wrong with you. Many people carry this belief without realizing it. Every mistake becomes proof of unworthiness. Every weakness becomes evidence of failure. Every emotion becomes another reason for guilt. Eventually, they stop fighting their flaws. They begin fighting themselves. And when a human being turns against themselves, growth becomes nearly impossible. Because growth requires energy. Self-condemnation destroys energy. Growth requires trust. Self-condemnation destroys trust. Growth requires courage. Self-condemnation destroys courage. Imagine an architect trying to build a magnificent cathedral while simultaneously demolishing its foundation. That is what self-hatred does. It attacks the very structure needed for transformation. This is why many cultures that obsess over guilt create individuals who feel permanently inadequate. They become afraid of their own humanity, afraid of their own minds, afraid of their own emotions, afraid of their own existence. And fear never creates wholeness. Only understanding can do that. The secret of the dark room. Now we arrive at the heart of this chapter. A truth so simple that most people overlook it. Imagine entering a room that has remained closed for 100 years. Darkness fills every corner. You gather a group of people. Together you decide, we will remove the darkness. You push. You shout. You wave your arms. You sweep the air. You attack every corner. Hours pass. Days pass. Nothing changes. The darkness remains. Eventually, two conclusions become possible. Either the darkness is stronger than you, or you are approaching the problem incorrectly. Most people choose the first conclusion, but the second is the truth. Darkness cannot be removed because darkness is not a thing. It has no substance, no independent existence. It is merely the absence of light. And the moment a lamp is lit, the entire struggle becomes unnecessary. No battle occurs. No victory occurs. No defeat occurs. The darkness does not retreat. It simply ceases to appear. Because it was never an independent reality. It was only the absence of illumination. And what if human suffering follows the same law? What if fear, confusion, anger, jealousy, greed, and inner conflict are not enemies to be fought? What if they are forms of psychological darkness? What if the real task is not fighting them, but awakening the light that has been missing? The great misdirection. For centuries, humanity has focused on removing darkness, fighting symptoms, suppressing impulses, condemning desires, declaring war on itself. The result has been predictable: exhaustion, hypocrisy, conflict, division. Because darkness cannot be expelled, only light can be invited. And this changes the entire direction of our search. The question is no longer, how do I get rid of anger? The question becomes, what light is absent that allows anger to dominate? The question is no longer, how do I eliminate fear? The question becomes, what understanding has not yet awakened? The question is no longer, how do I become moral? The question becomes, what transformation gives birth to morality naturally? These are radically different questions, and the answers lead toward a territory far deeper than behavior, far deeper than rules, far deeper than self-improvement. They lead toward consciousness itself. Because if darkness is only the absence of light, then the entire mystery of human transformation depends on discovering one thing. What exactly is this inner light? Where does it come from? Why do so few people awaken it? And why does its appearance seem to transform everything it touches? The next chapter takes us directly into that mystery. And there we will encounter the force that silently determines the quality of every human life. The lamp has not yet been lit, but we are finally standing at the doorway. Chapter 5. Lighting the lamp. There is a question hiding beneath everything we have explored so far. If fighting darkness does not work, what does? If suppressing anger strengthens it? If condemning desire distorts it? If forcing morality creates conflict? Then where do we go from here? This is the turning point of our journey. Until now, we have been dismantling illusions. We have examined the masks. We have uncovered the hidden conflicts. We have discovered the difference between symptoms and causes. But now another mystery emerges. If darkness cannot be pushed out, how is light invited in? And the answer may be far different from anything most of us were taught. The education of negation. Imagine a child standing at the edge of a vast forest. The world is new. Everything is alive with curiosity. Every sound is an invitation. Every path is a possibility. Every question is a doorway. Then the voices begin. Don't do that. Don't touch this. Don't think that. Don't feel this. Don't want that. Don't become this. Don't ask that. Don't go there. The child receives thousands of instructions. Most share a common theme. Not creation. Not discovery. Not awareness. Avoidance. Restriction. Negation. The message is subtle but powerful. Life becomes a long list of forbidden territories. And something important happens inside the mind. Curiosity begins transforming into resistance. The forbidden acquires a strange attraction. The prohibited becomes magnetic. The denied becomes fascinating. The rejected becomes irresistible. Most people never stop to ask why. Yet the answer has been hiding in plain sight. Human consciousness naturally pushes against unnecessary restraint. The more intensely something is forbidden, the more energy gathers around it. And this is where generations of misunderstanding have quietly accumulated. The window nobody could ignore. Imagine a quiet street. On one building hangs a simple sign. Most people walk past without noticing it. But now imagine a different sign. Large, bold, impossible to miss. It reads, "Do not look through this window." What happens next? An invisible force awakens. A question appears. Why not? What is behind it? What am I not supposed to see? What secret is hidden there? Even those who continue walking feel curiosity pulling at them. Something inside wants to know. Not because they are immoral, not because they are rebellious, because human consciousness is designed to explore. The prohibition itself creates fascination. The sign manufactures the desire it was intended to prevent. And what is true of windows is often true of life. The mind develops interest around what it is told it must not examine. This mechanism quietly shapes countless struggles. The more intensely people are taught to fear certain thoughts, the more those thoughts dominate attention. The more aggressively emotions are condemned, the more energy those emotions acquire. The more relentlessly desires are resisted, the more powerfully they return. And suddenly we begin to understand why so many battles against ourselves never end. We are feeding the very forces we hope to escape. The rebellion of a new generation. Every generation inherits the unfinished struggles of the previous one. Not only wealth, not only culture, not only traditions, but also frustrations, disappointments, failures, contradictions. And eventually a moment arrives when younger minds begin asking uncomfortable questions. What if the old methods do not work? What if the rules themselves require examination? What if the promised results never arrived? Throughout history, whenever a system repeatedly fails to transform human beings, a rebellion eventually emerges. Not necessarily because people desire chaos, but because they have grown tired of disappointment. When promises remain unfulfilled long enough, skepticism becomes inevitable. And so a fascinating pattern appears. One generation preaches, the next questions. One generation commands, the next resists. One generation imposes, the next rebels. This cycle repeats because prohibition inevitably generates opposition. Pressure creates counterpressure. Control creates resistance. Negation creates rebellion. Yet this rebellion is often misunderstood. Beneath the anger, beneath the rejection, beneath the frustration, there is usually a deeper longing. A longing for something authentic, something alive, something that transforms rather than merely restrains, something that feels true rather than imposed. And this longing points toward a discovery that humanity has repeatedly overlooked. The difference between pulling weeds and growing gardens. Imagine two gardeners. The first spends every day pulling weeds. From sunrise until sunset, he fights them relentlessly. Whenever one disappears, another emerges. His entire life becomes warfare. The second gardener focuses elsewhere. She nourishes the soil, provides water, creates conditions for growth, plants flowers, cultivates beauty. Months later, something remarkable happens. The flourishing garden leaves less and less room for weeds. Not because she fought them, because she nourished something greater. This distinction contains an immense truth about human transformation. Most people spend their lives trying not to become something. Not angry, not fearful, not jealous, not selfish, not weak, not inadequate. Their energy is consumed by resistance. But transformation begins when attention shifts. Instead of asking, "What should I eliminate?" a different question emerges. What should I awaken? That question changes everything. Because growth is fundamentally different from suppression. Growth is creative. Suppression is defensive. Growth expands life. Suppression contracts it. Growth generates energy. Suppression consumes it. And the human spirit was never designed to thrive through endless resistance. It was designed to awaken. The forgotten art of awakening. Most educational systems teach information. Most cultures teach conformity. Most institutions teach obedience. But very few teach awareness. Very few teach observation. Very few teach how to understand one's own consciousness. And yet consciousness is the source from which every experience emerges. Every emotion, every thought, every relationship, every success, every suffering, everything flows from the quality of awareness. This is why true transformation cannot begin with behavior. Behavior is the shadow. Awareness is the source. Change the source, and the shadow changes automatically. A lamp does not fight darkness. A lamp shines. A flower does not struggle to create fragrance. It blooms. A sunrise does not argue with the night. It appears, and night vanishes. The great mistake of humanity has been believing that darkness must be defeated. In reality, light simply has to be awakened. The positive path. Now we arrive at a crucial distinction. There are two fundamentally different approaches to growth. The negative path asks, what must be removed? What must be denied? What must be suppressed? What must be controlled? The positive path asks, what must be understood? What must be awakened? What must be illuminated? What must be brought into consciousness? The negative path produces tension. The positive path produces transformation. The negative path creates internal warfare. The positive path creates integration. The negative path divides the mind. The positive path unifies it. And only a unified consciousness can experience true freedom. This does not mean anything should be indulged blindly, nor does it mean chaos is desirable. It means understanding comes before change. Awareness comes before transformation. Light comes before disappearance of darkness. That order cannot be reversed. For centuries, humanity attempted to reverse it. The results speak for themselves. The seed beneath the soil. Deep beneath every forest lies a hidden miracle. A seed. Tiny, silent, invisible to the casual observer. Yet within that seed sleeps an entire future forest. Branches not yet formed. Leaves not yet grown. Flowers not yet opened. Everything already exists in potential. Human consciousness contains something similar. A sleeping possibility. A dormant awareness. A deeper intelligence. A hidden light. Most people live their entire lives without fully awakening it. Not because it is absent, because attention remains fixed elsewhere. Fixed on symptoms. Fixed on appearances. Fixed on struggles. Fixed on external circumstances. Meanwhile, the seed waits patiently beneath the soil, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be nourished, waiting to awaken. And this is why genuine spiritual growth is not about becoming someone else. It is about discovering what has been sleeping within all along. The universe has hidden extraordinary possibilities inside ordinary human beings, far more than most people suspect. But before those possibilities can flower, something essential must happen. The lamp must be lit. The awareness must awaken. The sleeping witness inside consciousness must open its eyes. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. How? How does awareness awaken? How does consciousness become luminous? How does a human being move from unconscious reaction to clear seeing? The answer is not theoretical. It is practical, experiential, transformational, and it begins with a simple event from childhood. An event so ordinary that most people would overlook it completely. Yet hidden inside, it lies the doorway to everything that follows. And that is where the next chapter begins. Chapter 6. The roots beneath everything. Every journey reaches a moment when the traveler realizes something unsettling. They have been caring for the wrong thing, not because they lacked sincerity, not because they lacked effort, but because they misunderstood where life truly begins. This realization is rarely comfortable. In fact, it often arrives as a shock, a disruption, a crack in the story we have been telling ourselves. And yet, without that crack, no light enters. Without that crack, transformation remains impossible. Because sometimes the greatest obstacle to truth is not ignorance. It is the illusion that we already understand. The garden that taught a lifetime. Many years ago, a man recalled an incident from his childhood. At first glance, it appeared ordinary. the kind of memory most people would forget. Yet hidden inside, it was an entire philosophy of human transformation. His mother possessed a beautiful garden. Not merely beautiful, extraordinary. The flowers seemed almost magical. People from nearby villages would visit simply to admire it. Colors bloomed everywhere. Fragrance drifted through the air. Life appeared to dance among the petals. The garden became a source of pride and joy. Then one day, his mother became ill. Confined indoors, she worried less about her own condition than about the fate of the garden. Who would care for it? Who would protect the flowers? Who would make sure everything survived? The young boy stepped forward. "I'll take care of it." His mother smiled and trusted him. What happened next would remain with him forever. The mistake that seems logical. The boy approached the task with complete dedication. From sunrise until sunset, he worked among the flowers. He watered blossoms individually. He cleaned leaves carefully. He removed dust. He admired every bud. He whispered encouragement to the plants. He gave his attention entirely to what he could see. Days passed, then more days. Something strange began happening. The flowers weakened. Leaves lost their freshness. Buds stopped opening. Colors faded. The garden slowly began dying. The harder he worked, the worse it became. Confused and worried, he doubled his effort. More attention, more care, more labor. Yet nothing improved. When his mother finally recovered enough to walk outside, she found devastation. The once vibrant garden had nearly collapsed. She looked at her son, then looked at the garden, and asked gently, "What exactly have you been doing?" He answered honestly, "I cared for every flower. I cleaned every leaf. I watched over every blossom." His mother laughed softly, not because she wished to mock him, but because she recognized a mistake nearly every human being makes. A mistake that extends far beyond gardens. What cannot be seen? She knelt beside a dying plant. Then she touched the soil. The flowers are not alive by themselves. The leaves are not alive by themselves. The blossoms are not alive by themselves. The life is in the roots. The boy stood silently. She continued, "You cared for what was visible. You forgot what was invisible. You loved the flower, but neglected the source from which the flower emerged." Then she spoke a sentence that would eventually become the foundation of an entirely different understanding of life. If the roots receive water, the flowers take care of themselves. If the roots die, no amount of attention to the flowers can save them. And suddenly, everything became clear. The flowers were not the cause. They were the result. The visible beauty depended entirely upon an invisible source. The root determined the blossom, not the other way around. The hidden pattern of human life. Most people spend their lives exactly as the boy cared for the garden. They focus on appearances, behavior, reputation, image, performance. They polish the flowers. Meanwhile, the roots remain neglected. They try to become loving, without understanding consciousness. They try to become peaceful, without understanding themselves. They try to become honest, without understanding fear. They try to become compassionate, without understanding the source of suffering. And eventually they become exhausted. Because flowers cannot be manufactured. They must grow, naturally, organically, as consequences of healthy roots. This is why every attempt to create virtue without awakening consciousness eventually fails. The flower cannot exist independently of the root. And yet humanity has repeatedly attempted exactly that, trying to manufacture the blossom while ignoring the soil. Trying to produce wisdom without awareness. Trying to produce morality without awakening. Trying to produce peace without understanding. And every failure points toward the same forgotten truth. The roots always come first. The plastic flower civilization. Yet the story becomes even more fascinating. Because when natural flowers fail to appear, human beings become inventive. They discover substitutes, imitations, artificial versions. Masks. Imagine a house whose garden has died. Instead of restoring the roots, the owner purchases plastic flowers. Bright colors, perfect shapes, permanent smiles. At first glance, everything looks beautiful. Visitors admire the display. Neighbors offer compliments. Photographs look impressive. But there is one problem. No fragrance exists. No life exists. No growth exists. No transformation exists. Only appearance remains. And this may be one of the greatest tragedies of modern civilization. Many people carry plastic flowers in their personalities. Borrowed kindness, borrowed spirituality, borrowed morality, borrowed beliefs, borrowed identities. Everything looks correct from a distance. Yet something feels strangely lifeless. Because what is authentic cannot be borrowed. It must grow from within. And anything that grows from within carries a fragrance impossible to imitate. The fragrance of awakening. Think back to everything we have uncovered throughout this journey. Anger, fear, desire, hypocrisy, conflict, self-condemnation. None of these were the true disease. They were symptoms, messages, signals. The roots always lay deeper. And now we can finally see the entire picture. Awareness is the water. Consciousness is the soil. Understanding is the sunlight. The awakened self is the root. Everything else emerges naturally. Compassion becomes a flower. Truthfulness becomes a flower. Love becomes a flower. Courage becomes a flower. Peace becomes a flower. These qualities are not manufactured. They bloom. And when they bloom, something extraordinary happens. Effort disappears. Pretense disappears. Conflict disappears. The fragrance spreads naturally, just as a rose never struggles to perfume the air. The wound that opens the door. Before every transformation comes discomfort. This is unavoidable. The old structures resist. The old beliefs protest. The old identities feel threatened. Sometimes truth arrives like a gentle breeze. Sometimes it arrives like a hammer striking stone. But both serve the same purpose. To awaken. Many people fear being challenged. They avoid discomfort. They avoid questioning. They avoid inner disturbance. Yet without disturbance, sleeping consciousness remains asleep. Without questions, deeper understanding never emerges. Without friction, insight rarely appears. The universe often enters our lives disguised as discomfort. A difficult conversation, a painful realization, a shattered assumption, an uncomfortable truth. What first feels like a wound may actually be an opening, a doorway, an invitation, the beginning of seeing. And those who welcome that invitation discover something remarkable. The very discomfort they feared becomes the catalyst for transformation. The last revelation. Now, at the end of this stage of our journey, we can finally state the central discovery in its simplest form. Human beings do not suffer because they lack morality. They suffer because they remain disconnected from the source from which morality naturally arises. The problem is not the absence of flowers. The problem is forgotten roots. The problem is not darkness. The problem is the absence of light. The problem is not the symptom. The problem is ignorance of the source. And therefore the solution has never been suppression, never condemnation, never self-hatred, never endless struggle. The solution is awakening. To know oneself, to observe oneself, to understand oneself, to illuminate consciousness. Because the moment awareness begins to awaken, life starts reorganizing itself around a different center, a deeper center, a truer center, a living center. And from that center emerges everything humanity has been searching for: peace, love, integrity, clarity, freedom, not as goals, not as achievements, not as rewards, but as natural consequences, like fragrance emerging from a flower, like light emerging from a flame, like spring emerging after a long winter. Epilogue. The dawn beyond the lamp. Every journey begins with a question, but the journeys that truly transform us never end with an answer. They end with a different question, a deeper one, a more beautiful one, a more dangerous one. When you first opened this book, you may have believed it was about morality, or happiness, or personal growth, or success. Perhaps you thought it was about becoming a better person. Most readers do. But if you have traveled honestly through these pages, you now know something surprising. The real subject was never morality. The real subject was awareness. Because morality can be imitated. Awareness cannot. Morality can be borrowed. Awareness cannot. Morality can be performed. Awareness cannot. Awareness is always real. And reality is where every transformation begins. Throughout this journey, we uncovered a hidden pattern that quietly governs human life. We discovered that most people spend their lives caring for flowers while neglecting roots, fighting shadows while ignoring the source of light, battling symptoms while overlooking the disease, trying to become something different before understanding what they already are. And perhaps the greatest revelation of all was this: the darkness was never the enemy. The darkness was the message. It was pointing toward an absence, an unlived awareness, an undiscovered center, a forgotten light. For years, perhaps for decades, you may have been told to fight yourself. Fight your anger. Fight your fear. Fight your desire. Fight your weakness. Fight your uncertainty. Fight your imperfection. And maybe you did. Maybe you fought bravely. Maybe you fought endlessly. Maybe you became exhausted. Most people do, because there is something impossible about that battle. The fighter and the thing being fought are often the same, and a mind divided against itself can never know peace. Only temporary victories, temporary defeats, temporary distractions, but never peace. The moment awareness enters, the battle changes, not because the darkness loses, but because the darkness is understood, and what is deeply understood begins to transform. This is the secret hidden beneath every genuine awakening. Transformation is not created by force. It is created by seeing. Not ordinary seeing. Not seeing with the eyes. Seeing with consciousness. Seeing without judgment. Seeing without condemnation. Seeing without fear. Seeing completely. The universe has hidden an extraordinary law within human experience. Whatever is brought into clear awareness begins changing its nature. Confusion becomes clarity. Reaction becomes understanding. Fear becomes intelligence, possession becomes freedom, and suffering becomes a teacher. Not overnight, not magically, not effortlessly, but inevitably, like ice becoming water beneath the warmth of the sun. Perhaps this is why the wisest people who have ever walked the earth seemed so different. Not because they possessed superior beliefs, not because they belonged to a special religion, not because they followed extraordinary rules, but because they saw themselves. They saw their minds. They saw their fears. They saw their desires. They saw the machinery of suffering operating within them. And in seeing it completely, they stepped beyond it. Most people attempt to escape their inner prison. The awakened person understands the prison. And understanding opens doors that force never can. There is another truth waiting here. A truth many readers may not fully recognize until years after finishing this book. The goal was never perfection. Perfection is one of the most sophisticated traps ever created. It disguises itself as growth, but often becomes self-rejection. The goal was never becoming flawless. The goal was becoming conscious. A conscious human being may still make mistakes, may still stumble, may still experience moments of confusion, but those moments no longer define them, because they are awake enough to learn from them, awake enough to observe them, awake enough to grow through them, awake enough not to become them, and that difference changes an entire life. Somewhere along the way, many people learned to distrust themselves, to criticize themselves, to condemn themselves, to shrink before their own potential. They began treating their inner world as an enemy territory, suspicious of every desire, ashamed of every weakness, afraid of every flaw. But consciousness grows differently. A seed does not bloom because it hates itself. A tree does not grow because it condemns its roots. A river does not reach the ocean because it fights its own current. Life unfolds through understanding, through nourishment, through awareness. The same is true for human beings. Everything noble within us grows from the same source. Love, compassion, wisdom, integrity, courage. These are not achievements. They are expressions of a consciousness becoming whole. If there is one thing I hope remains with you after the final page, it is this. Nothing essential is missing from you. The light you seek is not somewhere else. It is not hidden in another city, another relationship, another achievement, another possession, another identity, another belief. The light has always been within. Covered, perhaps. Forgotten, perhaps. Ignored, perhaps. But never absent. A cloud may hide the sun, but it cannot extinguish it. And the same is true of consciousness. No amount of confusion can destroy it. No amount of fear can erase it. No amount of darkness can defeat it. Because darkness has never possessed that power. Darkness only appears powerful until the lamp is lit. And now we arrive at the most beautiful paradox in the entire journey. The lamp was never the destination. The lamp was only the beginning. Many people imagine awakening as the final step. It is not. It is the first authentic step. The first moment of truly being alive. The first moment of truly seeing. The first moment of truly participating in existence instead of merely reacting to it. Awareness is not the end of the road. It is the opening of a gate. Beyond that gate lies an even greater mystery. How does one live from awareness? How does one love from awareness? How does one create from awareness? How does one build relationships, businesses, families, communities, and civilizations rooted in awareness? These questions belong to a larger journey. A journey that continues long after this book closes. Perhaps years from now, you will forget many of the stories contained in these pages. You may forget specific examples, specific chapters, specific sentences. That is natural, but I hope one thing remains. A quiet remembrance, a subtle shift in perspective, a small inner voice that appears whenever life becomes complicated, whenever fear arises, whenever anger appears, whenever confusion returns. A voice that whispers, "Do not fight the darkness. Look for the lamp." If that single insight remains alive within you, this entire journey has served its purpose. As these pages come to an end, another beginning waits. Not in this book, not in another book, not in another teacher, not in another philosophy, but within your own awareness. The greatest adventure available to any human being is still ahead. The exploration of consciousness, the discovery of the self beyond conditioning, the awakening of the light that has patiently waited beneath every fear, every ambition, every struggle, and every dream. And perhaps, someday, after walking far enough into that light, you will discover something that cannot be taught, something that cannot be borrowed, something that cannot be explained, only lived. Until then, remain curious, remain awake, remain willing to question, remain willing to see. And whenever darkness appears, remember, the answer was never to fight it. The answer was always to light the lamp. The journey ends here, and the real journey begins now.